And welcome back for our second podcast over the Thanksgiving weekend. We're going to go straight into it. We've already got a gaming podcast that you can check out. We will link you to that in this post. We're going to start straight away hitting up news. If you didn't hear, over the last couple of years, there's been a piracy dispute by the US government and a company called Aptricity. Aptricity make military software that the US Army uses. The US Army uses it to manage their troops and supply movement. And the company Aptricity, they signed an agreement with the United States government back in 2004, which allowed the government to use their software on 5 servers and 150 standalone devices. But in the last couple of years, Aptricity have seen that the US Army has actually installed pirated versions of the software. Up to 93 servers have pirated software from the US Army and over 9,000 standalone devices. It doesn't sound like much, like 93 servers and 9,000 devices. But when you consider that for each server, now remember there's 93 servers, it costs $1.35 million per server and about $5,000 per device. So Aptricity are looking at about a total of loss in lost sales to the US government of about $224 million. So as you can imagine, the company are a bit pissed off about that. The US government settled with them. Instead of paying the $224 million or so bill, they paid $50 million in a settlement. So the Obama administration anti-piracy, and you've even got Vice President Joe Biden saying that things like piracy is theft, clean and simple, quote unquote from the Vice President saying that, but then the same government is caught stealing. So I don't really see how the Obama administration can be seen as the good guys there at all. And what I didn't post about it in the news. I didn't want to seem anti-government or anything like that, but no one was arrested. No one served jail time. Like, if that was me and I was stealing $224 million of content, I copy and paste a picture and I'm done for IP theft. You know, this is $224 million. Someone should have gone to jail. Someone should have been fired from the government, but nothing. What do you think, Charles? Would you like to have a company that had $224 million of content stolen from you?
Oh, I'd be pretty pissed. I think that I do think that it's a little atrocious that they charge $5,000 per device it's installed on, but they're running a business and they have a right to charge whatever they want. That's part of being an American. I won't go into my feelings on the Obama administration. I don't think that would make a lot of our readers happy, but yeah,
I think if our readers had access to my Facebook, they wouldn't be very happy.
I just think that I do think that they should have settled for more than $50 million. $224 million worth of stuff was stole, and I agree with you. Nobody got fired, but Edward Snowden mentions one thing that the government is spying on your Facebook profile, and he gets exiled from the country.
Yeah, that's right. That's where you've got it's even worse than double standards. Like, it's disgusting that they can do this kind of stuff. Like, Edward Snowden is just slandered. Like, you are an absolute disgrace to the American people, and all he was doing was telling the truth. He was telling the truth that the government lies to you, steals things from you. You have no privacy. Not even as an American, as a human being that uses electronics, you don't have privacy. But then, yeah, they steal $224 million of goods, and it's okay. I think the reason why why Aptricity took a $50 million settlement is that I'm pretty sure that they're still a contractor to the US Army. So I'm guessing that the US Army couldn't go without their services. So maybe here's $50 million up front, but you're still our customer. But that's my opinion.
That's more than likely what happened. I mean, I still find it atrocious that if I download one movie, one song, whatever, the RIAA, the MPAA, will come after me for everything I'm worth. And the government will back them 100% and say, they're correct, you stole their property. But, the government's doing this, and they're like, well, we only think it's worth $50 million. I don't know. I don't know how I actually feel about that. I think that it's atrocious. That's the only word I can come up with.
I think it's almost like a show of power. Like, we are the U.S. government, and this is what we can get away with. It's kind of disgusting that, sure, no one was hurt, and it wasn't something to do with like war crimes or something, but you're still like, $224 million of piracy. Like, you've seen single mums that have downloaded some music for their kids, 1 or 2 albums, and they're dragged through court and completely slandered as if they're some kind of evil monster for downloading some songs for their child. And then they're thrown in jail or given like a $200,000 fine to pay. But you're the US government, you get away with it. Like, it's almost like, yeah, it completely astounds me that they can get away with that. But they get away with plenty of things in the world, and they don't seem to have to pay for any consequences. So, moving on from that, because else we could be here for three millennia talking about it. Netflix. I'm not a Netflix user because I'm based in Australia, but I do keep up with a lot of what they do. The last couple of months, they've been pushing a lot of Ultra HD talk. Ultra HD, obviously 4K. That they're going to be pulling 4K content into their servers next year, so early 2014, probably second half of 2014. But they currently call 1080p Super HD. There's been a report. Digital Trends actually had a really good article where they actually went through and were trying to find where the problems were with streaming Super HD, so 1080p content, and they found that it would actually load. So it would buffer for a couple of seconds, load up in low quality, and then once it's buffered enough, it would actually kick into 1080p. But if your internet stream or your internet speed, for whatever reason, someone started uploading something in the background and your downloadability dropped, it would actually kick back to that buffer of lower quality, like maybe 480p. And then once the buffer had caught back up, it'd go into 1080. So I found it interesting. Not many other people covered it, but I think that I saw something different where if they're having trouble now streaming 1080p, how are they going to stream 4K? That's the big problem. Like, for me, I'm looking at going into 4K as soon as I can, but I'm not going to be able to stream it here on my internet connection, obviously. I use a carrier pigeon for internet here in Australia. And streaming 4K is just going to be ridiculous. So, are Netflix going to be are they going to be running into problems in the future with 4K? If they can't handle 1080p now, what's going to happen in a couple of months?
I have Netflix. I use it quite a lot. I have one of the fastest connections you can buy in my zip code. It's a 40 megabit down connection, and I'm having trouble streaming at 40 megabits down. I mean, it will kick into that lower quality buffer, and even at times I can run a speed test and I'm still getting 45, 50 megabits down, and it kicks into that lower quality stream, and my connection cannot even keep up with their lower quality stream. And this is on a wired connection to my TV. It's not a wireless connection. And it's even worse, here over at my girlfriend's, where I'm at right now. She has Comcast, and she's in a big residential neighborhood. I actually live kind of out in the country a little bit. But in her residential neighborhood, she pays for a 40 megabit connection as well. And around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, her internet connection screeches to like 2 megabits, even less. And it makes Netflix almost unusable. And to even further complicate that, Comcast, one of the major ISPs here in the States, just imposed a 300 gigabyte data cap on everyone. So heavy Netflix users and heavy gamers are going to be hit pretty hard at just a 300 gigabyte data cap. I burned through 300 gigabytes in less than a week.
Well, especially like if you consider the future, like next-gen consoles have just launched, and a lot of the games are between 20 and 50 gigabytes. And then if you're streaming an Ultra HD movie, you're probably looking at a good 20 gig, even if it has a decent compression.
And what about when you upload your videos from it that you record? When you do all this other stuff?
All the rear-facing cameras on smartphones now, 8 megapixel, or 13, or 15, or 16 megapixel, the 4K recording. Oh, here, Charles, check out this video I just took in 4K, and then you don't realize, even if for 2 or 3 minutes, it's a gig or two. That's a lot of video that you got to upload.
I actually monitor my bandwidth at home quite closely, and just playing Battlefield for a couple nights a week, watching a couple videos on YouTube, doing my TweakTown work, and that's pretty much it. I'm a heavy internet user, but I'm not a heavy content user. And I maybe watch 1 or 2 movies a month on Netflix. I watch a couple TV shows a week on Netflix. I'm breaking 300 gigabytes a week alone. 300 gigabytes in a week, and I don't see how anyone can live on 300 gigabytes a month. Maybe I'm an exception. I don't know. I know my habits. I don't know everyone else's habits, but I don't think 300 gigabytes is enough. And I think that's just gonna, when Netflix releases 4K, a 4K movie like a Blu-ray quality 4K movie is going to be 45, 50 gigabytes minimum.
Yeah. So even if they use good compression, it's still even half of that. If you watch 2 or 3 movies a week, that's still 100 gig roughly average. Average use 100 gig. That's a lot of data that you're using per week. And again, in the States, that's okay. But what about here in Australia, where where internet plans are, you pay about $50, $60 a month for 100 gigabytes of data. That's bam, gone within a couple of days of streaming content.
Yeah, and what happens when you get like a 3 or 4 hour movie like The Hobbit or one of the Lord of the Rings movies or something? That 4 hour movie is going to take 100 gigs. Maybe even if it's compressed, it's going to take 50 gigs, whatever. That's 50. That's what's that? 1/6 of your monthly cap.
Yeah, for something that you're only streaming as well. It's not like you're downloading it.
You don't get to watch it again.
Watch it again and again. You're just streaming it.
And
so if you were able to download like an MKV quality of that for 25 gig, I'll jump on board. But when I can only stream it and that's it, that's the problem.
So okay, and here's another thing. So Netflix does kick down to that second tier, that slower tier, when your bandwidth gets bad. So what if it is buffering 1080p at the same time and buffering 720p on top of that? So when you have an issue, it kicks down to that lower buffer. You're using 5 or 6 times the data.
Yep, that's right.
And it's just not going to work. I mean, I don't know where we're going to go from here, but you can guarantee when I move next year, I'm not moving somewhere where there's Comcast. Won't happen.
And that's the problem, is that exactly like I'm the same. When I move next, I'll be very careful of where I move just based on my internet, because here in Australia, like I've talked to you about it before, it's just ridiculous. Like my upload is 0.3 megabit. Like I don't even have 1 megabit up. I can't even. We're actually recording this podcast. We can't even do Google Hangouts because my internet is so bad. It's that bad. So 4K when it comes in, like we've just had the NBN, the National Broadband Network, starting to roll out across the country, and we've just had a government change, and the new government saying 25 megabit is all you'll need, and that's going right up to 2020. 25 megabit is all you need. Now Charles has a faster internet connection than that now, and Australia they're talking about as a nation, that's all we need is 25 megabit. And my argument to friends that work at ISPs and to people that have internet is, if you're now you don't need 25 megabit, but what about when 4K starts coming in, which it is now? So I want to stream 4K off YouTube, and I want to upload some 4K at the same time from my mobile phone. I work from home. My daughter's getting older, so she's going to want to get into computers and play games and start streaming. If my friends come over, they want to jump on my Wi-Fi. My brother comes over to visit you. By the time you do all that, that's your everything. It's like a boat. You have a boat that has 25 megabit, and every person that goes in, it sinks and sinks and sinks until it becomes unusable. You cannot use it, and they don't actually understand this. Netflix should be going towards a different method of maybe BitTorrent or Usenet, where they can actually go, look, you can pay 30% more a month. Like maybe instead of $20 a month, you pay $35 a month, and you can download the files. And then once the file's on your computer, we'll give you a player, and so once you've got, say the file is 20 gig, maybe once you've got 3 or 4 gig, which on a 40 megabit connection you could do in 20 minutes or something like that. Once you've got that initial amount, it will just play at 1080p, and then by the time you've caught up, it's still downloading. I don't see how they can't do that. Like, it's in this day and age, like we're virtually a month away from 2014, is that you can't even stream 1080p with a 40 megabit connection. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me. If Netflix are listening to this, we would love to have you on. Email us. We would love to have that explained to us. Moving on to another interesting topic, Bitcoin. Bitcoin has just tipped over $1,000 in value, considering that it started off at cents on the dollar. Cents, C-E-N-T-S, cents on the dollar. It is now over $1,000. In the last 12 months, it has gone up by 4,000%. So 4,000% year over year is an absolutely gigantic increase. It's being backed more and more by companies, by individuals mostly, and it's starting to hurt the fiat-based currency. So you're getting reserve banks and central banks starting to actually look at it and going, wow, what do we do? Do we invest in it? Do we what do we do with it? They don't know, because you have cash, which isn't really cash because it's on your credit card. Credit is just an imaginary number created on a server. We all know that's, if you don't think of it that way, you need to rethink money. Governments just print money out of nowhere, where this stuff kind of has just taken off. One story that we thought was interesting is that an early Bitcoin owner actually purchased 10,000 Bitcoins when it first launched for about $50 US. $50 for 10,000 Bitcoins. He ended up giving them away and selling them over time for, might have spent $50 and maybe made $300 or $400 from it. That's pretty good. 7 or 8 time investment. But if he had kept them, now valued at $1,000 each, would have had $10 million. So a lot of those early investors, if you had 50 Bitcoins or 100 Bitcoins and you bought them for 1 cent each, that's a lot of money.
I first started reporting on Bitcoins when they were at the $25 range. That's when I first started at TweakTown. So in a year they went from $25 to $1,000. But I'm kicking myself in the ass now for not investing $10,000 in them when they were at $25 a piece. I mean,
so even buying a $25 a piece, even if you had bought 10 of them, that would have been nice. Like you would have been sitting very pretty right now, like 4,000% on something like that. So let's work that out. So if you had spent $25 each, so $250 times 4,000, it's $1 million. Oh no, it's not times 4,000. 200. Yes. Yep. And you could have, if you had invested your money 5 years ago into Bitcoins instead of Apple stock, can you imagine how much money you'd have right now? People bought $1 million of Apple stock and saw it drop from $800 a share to $400 a share in a year. If you had bought 1 million Bitcoins for $25 each and had a 4,000% markup on that.
And I'm guilty of reporting them. In my reports, I've called them a passing fad before. And I actually really thought they were. When Silk Road got busted, I thought that was the end of Bitcoins. But this week, Richard Branson also announced that Virgin Galactic will be accepting Bitcoins for your tourist flight into space. And he mentioned he mentioned that he'd bought he didn't say how much, but a substantial amount of Bitcoins. So in the last week, he's probably became a billionaire a few times over already. He's already a billionaire, but he probably made a few million or billion.
So I just don't know. Like I'm waiting for a correction or a complete crash. At this price, the next milestone over $1,000 is when it hits the same price as gold. So when we start seeing $1,200-$1,300, it's going to be interesting. But if it keeps going above gold, what is it really backed by? And that's why a lot of investors and a lot of people are going to be starting to get frightened, or at least wary of it, is that it's not really backed by anything, because there's no big central bank behind it. There's no big, government or anything behind it going, if it crashes, we're here, or, we're going to put our foot down and we're going to protect investments.
Here's the thing too. Okay, so Bitcoins, they're not a limited or an unlimited supply. There is a limited number of Bitcoins available in the world, and once those hashes run out, because you have to mine them you basically mine them by putting a PC to work doing very complicated math. And it takes hashes, it pulls hashes from decryption ciphers and other stuff. I don't know exactly how it works at that level, but I do know that there is a finite amount of Bitcoins that can be mined in the world. And once they run out, there are no more.
Yep. And then that's where I don't. That's where I think that's where the market will just stop. Like it's going like this, but it's going to go like this, and then that correction is only going to go down. It's not going to go like this. Okay, there's no more Bitcoins ever, and then someone's going to release more Bitcoins. It can't just go back up. The one thing I don't know if you've noticed is that other digital currency is going up. So because of the the huge waves that Bitcoin is making in the news. Even digital currency like Litecoin and stuff like that, they're seeing massive strides in terms of value. I've actually seen a report that said Litecoin is being considered the silver to Bitcoin's gold, which is what I believe. I think that you're going to see Bitcoin be the gold, and it will skyrocket probably up to about $2,000, and that's mainly going to be from the people investing in the last 7 to 14 days. Going into the next couple of months, when it was only just $500 a couple of weeks ago, and now it's $1,000. I think we're going to see it go up, and then it's going to come back down. But it's going to be the millions of investors that will come in thinking, not knowing how it works. Like Bitcoins is like gold. There's we haven't found all of the Bitcoins yet. Like we haven't found all the gold reserves in the world. But we will. So where Bitcoins, we're going to do it. We know the end already. Like with gold, they're always like, oh, we've just dug here and we found some new gold reserves. Bam, gold goes up. Or a new report comes out and goes, we've hit the limit of gold. Like this is how much we think we've got left. Gold comes down. And gold is very reliant on its price based on the financial market and based on the dollar. Like when the dollar starts going down, people start getting scared and going into precious metals. So Bitcoins are going to be that new thing where people start investing, and I think that's going to drive the price up. I'm actually going to start investing in Litecoins. I'm going to start doing that. Because of the fanfare Bitcoins are getting, it's going to drive all that other digital currency up, and I want to get onto Litecoin while it's cheap, versus spending $1,000 on a single Bitcoin.
I've actually been thinking about doing the same thing, and here's the big thing about the Bitcoin mining. Okay, so a year ago or 2 years ago, it was fairly easy for anyone to mine a Bitcoin. And it's still just as easy for as long as you have the hardware to do it. I mean, you can set a Raspberry Pi, a $35 Raspberry Pi, to mine a Bitcoin. But the big thing is, many of the world's supercomputers that you can hire out right now are mining these Bitcoins. These guys who are making millions of dollars are hiring these supercomputers for a week, paying $100,000 to use this supercomputer for a week to do nothing but mine Bitcoins.
Yep.
And because they're involving some of the fastest processing machines in the world into this, the limited stock of Bitcoins is slow. It's trickling down much faster than it should. That's kind of why the price is kind of going up too, is because they're seeing that it's a little harder to get your hands on a single Bitcoin now, because you don't just pull down an entire Bitcoin. Each person pulls down a hash of a big pile, like one big group. And each hash is part of a Bitcoin. So you may have to mine 16 or 17 or 25 or 200, I don't know the number, hashes before you get a complete Bitcoin.
And that's the problem. I think a lot of people, they don't understand the hashes, and that you buy gold, you either have paper gold where it's in a safe somewhere, or in somewhere you've got it on the internet, or you've got physical gold. Where Bitcoin is, it's like people don't understand the hash, and that you can write down that hash, like it might be 20, 30 digits long, whatever it is, and then you'll put that in a safe somewhere, or you'll hide it somewhere, but then if you lose it, you're done. So it's the case that me and Charles were talking about it before we started recording, is that someone in the UK had I think it was a couple of thousand Bitcoins, and it ended up being that he just threw his hard drive out, and it was in a dump near his town, and that the value of the Bitcoins was £7.5 million. So that's just insane that you can just throw away $7.5 million. And I think that's the point that people don't get, is that you don't actually own anything. You own a password to money. And if you lose that password to money, you can never, ever get it back. You can't just email support@bitcoin.com and go, I lost my hash. Can you please provide it back to me? They're not going to do that, period. I think that once we've got NFC technology and stuff like that, like you'll be able to trade currency a lot easier. But then people, because it's digital, you're gonna have hacking, you're gonna have all that kind of stuff. So I think that while there's good parts of it, there's also bad. But same with cash. You've got people that pirate cash, that print their own money in the US, because the US is just paper. People print that, and you can fool people with that. Where I think digital currency, you can't do that as easily. And the next topic on our podcast is Google employees being told and not ordered, but being encouraged to use Apple's Mac OS platform. Considering that Google make their own platform, Chrome OS, on their Chrome piece or Chromebooks, and being a big player in the Windows market as well, with like Chrome, what Google Chrome is in the browser. It's weird, but Google have actually said, pushing Macs is a big thing. Google system engineer Clay Cavanis, I hope I pronounced that right, said there was a time when Macs were a small part of the Google fleet, but as of now, it is. If you start at Google and want to use a platform other than Mac, you have to make a business case. So pretty much, if you don't use a Mac when you work at Google, you have to sell the idea of not using a Mac to your peers and to your bosses. And I did say in my news post, I see where they're coming from. The Mac OS X platform is a more stable OS. I'm not saying that Windows is unstable, but it is generally perceived as more unstable than Mac, or than OS X, I should say. But it's interesting to see where Google are coming from. And then you've got Google chairman Eric Schmidt. He's actually come out and said that the Macs are superior to PC, and actually compared them to Android devices, saying it's the same. I'll actually read out his quote: "Like the people who moved from PCs to Macs and never switched back, you will switch from iPhone to Android and never switch back." So I was the same. I switched from an iPhone 3G to HTC Desire years and years ago, and then to a Galaxy S2, Galaxy S3, and then Nexus devices. And I'll never go back to an iPhone unless they were to show me something completely revolutionary, which I don't think they'll do. But they're using that same kind of logic where, once you go from an iPhone to Android, it's a free thing. But Windows to Mac, I can see where they're coming from, but MacBook Pros and Mac Pros and iMacs and all that kind of stuff, they're very expensive compared to a PC. What do you think, Charles? You don't actually own a Mac, do you? You own Windows machines?
Yep, I only Windows and Linux only. Android guy too. But I know a lot of web development companies. It used to be what I used to do. A lot of the biggest web development companies in the country will only let you use Macs, and their idea behind it's a security issue for them company-wise. It's easier to secure a Mac, to lock down a Mac security-wise totally, than it is a PC or a Linux box. I don't understand where Google's coming from this, other than maybe just the security issue, because there's no power difference. The only difference a Mac has over a PC, other than the security stuff, is its cost, and it's exponentially more. That's the only thing I can think of why they would require this, is they have an integrated security thing, and they just need to keep everybody uniform. It's really weird to hear Google talk so well about Apple, though. I mean, that's kind of shocking.
It feels weird, but I think my take from it is that if you were to compare, when you buy an Apple Mac, you might buy, or not an Apple Mac, but you might buy an OS X based device. So you might buy a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air or whatever. You get a MacBook Pro, you put it on your desk, sweet. Open it up, it's just Apple software. That's it. You go buy a PC, you go buy Dell, Lenovo, HP, Sony, Samsung. No matter what you buy, you've got bloatware crap on it. And that's the problem. Whenever I worked at an IT retailer for 10 years, IT retailer, I should say, for 10 years, we would sell custom built machines. If I sold a laptop, I would generally recommend to the customer, and we would normally do it for them, that we would wipe Windows on the drive, and we would install a retail copy of Windows, and then it was nice and fresh. No bloat, no other software that you don't need. And I think that's probably where Google's coming from, is that a lot of these people, you got to think, a lot of people that buy a laptop generally just buy a laptop because it's cheap. They don't look at the screen resolution, they don't look at this, they don't look at that, just want something, it's touchscreen, I'll buy that. They don't want anything special. They get the bloat, they go home, they install BitTorrent, they start downloading all sorts of movies and games, and their machine becomes infected. Where a MacBook is much less prone to having those problems. So I kind of see where Google are coming from, but then, like you said, it's weird to hear a company like Google, hey employees, can you all buy Macs? We want you to support our major competitor in the mobile operating system space. So it's weird, but I think it's kind of good that they're doing it. They're pushing one platform, and I think over the next couple of years we're really going to see the Mac take off. If they can drop the prices, then it might change.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm sticking.
The last bit of news for this mini holiday podcast is OCZ. And I will let Charles take this. He has been all over it. He was pretty much the first in the world to report on this. OCZ is done. They are finished. They are kicked to the curb. And that's it. Charles, take it away. What's happened?
I got an interesting email yesterday morning from our good friend Chris Ramsayer, letting me know that OCZ's stock wasn't trading. We were 2 hours into the market opening, and their stock hadn't moved at all. And so we both started digging around and found out that they had suspended trading on their stock. And we instantly jumped in. I reported that. There were some rumors floating around about why it was going on. We tried not to speculate on anything because it's not what we do here at TweakTown. So after making some phone calls and talking to some sources that we have, we learned that OCZ had ran out of money. They were filing bankruptcy. And as soon as Toshiba heard that they were filing bankruptcy, Toshiba came in and this has been weeks in the making. Toshiba came in and said, hey, we will buy your assets from you if you file bankruptcy. Basically what that means is Toshiba came in and said, we will buy your technology, your IP, your patents, your controller, your flash controller, pretty much everything but their debt and their name Toshiba would buy.
And do you think that Toshiba were in talks maybe before?
Oh, definitely.
Before this happened, like for them to have jumped in this quickly and to not take their debt, not take their name, like Toshiba could have taken their debt, Toshiba could have taken their name, but do you think that over the last year, like we've been reporting a lot of on a lot of the OCZ issues over the last year or so, and maybe their name was too tarnished for Toshiba. Toshiba has a good name behind them. Maybe it was too tarnished for Toshiba to take.
We actually, if you could look back in the post I made, the second post I made that day, Toshiba actually sat down and a couple months ago they said, hey, we're interested in buying you. It was a rumor that went around. We were the first to report on it as well. And then we didn't hear anything for a couple weeks. And then if you start looking at Toshiba's stock, it kind of went up a little and then flattened off, and it just stayed around within a few cents of what it should be, of what it was, for about a month. The whole month of October, Toshiba stock pretty much was flat. And then towards the beginning of November, when we started hearing issues about OCZ, when their stock started taking a nosedive, you could see Toshiba stock slowly picking up. And it just slowly rose a couple dollars, $4 or $5 over a couple weeks. And then this week on Monday, their stock rose by $20.
That's a big shift, a big part of, like, that's a big change for them.
Yeah, it's a big jump, and now nobody knows if that's the reason. It could be just a coincidence, but me and Chris dug into it a little deeper, and it appears that Toshiba's been talking to him since we first reported the rumor. OCZ's had almost $2.5 million cash bleed for the last several months. And basically what the cash burn means is that they have $2 million on top of their overhead that's going out of the door every month. And their sales have been down. They haven't really released anything interesting except for this new controller that they've mentioned they've had. Toshiba didn't have a flash controller, so Toshiba saw this as a chance to come in, get a flash controller, get some IP, and get a couple new distribution channels pretty cheap. We don't know what they sold for yet. And we actually think that they were supposed to announce Friday, tomorrow, the day this podcast goes live, actually. They were supposed to release the official announcement then, but we think what happened is they got word that we knew what was going on, and they kind of beat us to the punch on releasing the information because they didn't want it to hurt their Black Friday sales, which, that may not have happened. It may have happened. I like to think that I caused them to release early.
Does it make you feel responsible?
No, not really responsible. It just makes me feel a little sense of I guess ego. Like my ego got a little bigger. But
Yeah.
I don't want anybody, all of our coverage. We don't hate OCZ. They're a major site sponsor.
No.
We love them.
Yep.
We know a lot of the people at the company. We think they're great. But at the same time, we have an obligation to report the news as we see it, and that's what we did.
It's sad to see them go, but it'd be the same thing if Microsoft or Apple were to close down tomorrow.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the same thing. We have to report. If we were to not report on it, we'd be biased, and we can't do that.
Yeah, no, and we actually got called out in a couple comments on Facebook. People said that we hit them pretty hard over the last month, and maybe we did hit them hard, but I would do the same thing for Microsoft, Samsung. If something happened big at TweakTown, I would do this. I would report the same news on TweakTown.
Well, you see how harsh and critical I am on Apple, and they're one of the one of the biggest technology sites in the world, or technology companies in the world.
It's not that I don't like a company. It's just that I'm a journalist. I'm a news reporter, and I cannot be biased in it. If I become biased in it, then everything I write from that point on, no matter what it's about, becomes tainted. It becomes invalid. So I just report the news as I see it, the same way you do. If a story's big, I'm going to cover it because people deserve to know. The investors deserve to know. The people who buy into that product deserve to know. Now we've had a couple questions on Facebook too. I'm going to hit this really quick before we go. If Toshiba's going to honor the warranties. At the moment, we don't know. Toshiba doesn't actually own anything yet. They're waiting on all the numbers to come in and everything to be ironed out before they actually acquire the assets. But chances are that if Toshiba buys into it, they might pick up some of the warranties on some of the new stuff. They probably won't take over the 3 or 4 year stuff that a couple years old, like where they got maybe a year left on their warranty. But the stuff that's been produced in the last year or two, they'll probably pick it up. Don't hold me to that. It might not happen. We've sent out emails to Toshiba, to OCZ. Chris Ramsayer sent out emails to contacts he has high in the industry. We're waiting on replies. They might not be replying, because it's the holidays. They might not be replying because they just don't want to say anything until it's official. As soon as we find out what they're going to do warranty-wise, we'll put a big post on it and we'll let everyone know. It's, don't be scared right now. Still buy an OCZ SSD if you want. They're good SSDs.
Exactly, they make good products. It's sad to see them go, but I think that's we've been able to see it for a long time coming. It was just sad to see it happen, during such a good time, like during Thanksgiving, is seeing a company go down like that, and it's not just good for it's not only bad just for the company, for the employees. A couple of days ago, you probably thought you had a job, and then now, just on the holidays, your company's done. So I feel bad for those employees. Like, I've got a family to feed, and straight on the holidays, like pretty much 24 hours before, bam, sorry, that's it. We're done. So. And that's it. We're going to wrap it up. We will have another podcast or two at the end of the weekend with some more hopefully exciting news. Thanks for tuning in.